See if my mic's on. Good evening, everyone. I now call this February 23rd study session meeting of the Prior Lake Savage Area Schools Board of Education to order. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance as you're able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our first item up is purpose and agenda. Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair Bullion.
Public forum, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Public forum first. Sorry, my bad. I'm going to read a little public forum. First thing up on the agenda. This time is set aside to receive citizen input. Citizen input is important to our governance role. We thank you for your engagement with the board and ask that speakers respect the 3-minute time limit and that you please speak in the manner you prefer being spoken to. Thank you. Our speaker today is Michelle Lindell.
Hello, my name is Michelle Lindell, and I am here to speak to you on behalf of my daughter, Claire. Claire is in the Life Skills program at Jeffers Pond and is in a wheelchair. She is nonverbal and she requires a nurse to attend school with her. We have been blessed with being a part of the JP community for the past 3 years when the Life Skills program grew and she needed to move from Redtail to Jeffers Pond. Between the staff, the students, the administration, and the unified program, we have been very grateful for our experience for our daughter. I do want to touch about an inequitable and an accessibility issue that we have seen at Jeffers Pond, and that is in regards to Claire and other students with mobility issues not having the ability to move via sidewalk to the field where gym is held and other outside educational experiences happen. For the past 3 years, she has had to do her Phi-Ed class on the blacktop and not be able to participate with her mobile peers. I know that this has been a trying time for our district in terms of finances, but I feel that this is something that is inequitable and an accessibility issue. And I asked the board to really look into this issue and make sure that all kids have access to all areas of the school, including the Jeffers Pond field for all students to be able to have physical education and outdoor learning experiences equitably. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is the purpose and agenda. Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair Bullion, Board of Directors. This evening for our study session, we have a variety of topics that we'll cover this evening. To dive a little bit deeper into some of the conversation topics listed, first we'll do a proclamation, and then in terms of our oversight of operations, we'll give a review of the RFPs that came in for our loading dock RFP that we shared about 2 weeks ago. Give you an update on the goals and strategies for the A&I plan, looking at conversations around our program staffing additions and reductions discussions that are beginning in the district, and then an evaluation statement from the last closed session for my mid-year formative with the board. And then we have a couple of policies, 100 policies for the board, and then closing to an adjourned for a closed session for negotiations.
Very good. Tonight's proclamation is National School Social Worker Week. I will read that proclamation. Prior Lake Savage Area Schools recognizes March 2nd through 6th, 2026 as School Social Workers Appreciation Week, celebrating our deep gratitude for these essential staff. Whereas school social work programs are vital components of education as recognized in federal law, whereas school social workers provide critical support to students facing barriers such as disability, poverty, trauma, mental illness, homelessness, and family stress. Whereas their expertise in school culture and climate and in building partnerships between home, school, and community is essential to student success. Therefore, the Prior Lake Savage Area School Board of Education proclaims the week of March 2nd through 6th, 2026 as School Social Workers Week, honoring their extraordinary service and impact on students' lives. Director Chuka.
Hi. Thank you so much for your appreciation for school social workers. I wanted to come up and also express my appreciation. They play a really important role in supporting our students and families and connecting schools, families, staff to resources in our community. Their work really strengthens not just individual students, but school climate as well, making sure that students have what they need and families have what they need, removing barriers to learning and ensuring that every student feels safe and successful at school. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up on the agenda is oversight of operations. The construction services loading dock RFP. Director Powers.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So we did get some interesting numbers that came in from this RFP. One of them shocked me by being higher than even I estimated, and the other one came in substantially less than what I estimated. I'm confident in both companies as they put in their bids. We've worked with both of them before in this district, so it's, like I said, I'm confident with both of them. The ones that came in most favorable, in all honesty, like I mentioned, I'm surprised. All three bids for both Five Hawks, Glendale, and Hidden Oaks came in at $20,000 more than I had budgeted for the entire project at Hidden Oaks. So all three projects came in at $441,701 by one of our vendors, compared to the original budget of $866,000. So I'm very happy with that. That's where I'm going to recommend that we go forward with, and I'm going to make sure that you have that material so that all of you can look at those. And then when the questions come up, please definitely reach out. The other bid I mentioned was substantially more. They were over $1 million. So that's a big difference. Cost savings, and we were even considering not doing a couple of those loading docks to hold off, but at that price, I really would like to proceed. So I'll present those numbers to all of you, and then we can talk about it a lot more coming forward. Are there any questions at the moment?
Board members? Director France?
Just to confirm, have you been able to question any of the vendors for the bid to determine any nuances and the differences in price?
That's a good question. So the biggest difference, honestly, is one of them is a company that it's just a couple of people working out of their truck versus a company that has overhead that they need to worry about for a lot of things. Like I mentioned, the company that is the lowest, we have had them for several projects here in the district. They rebuilt the trash enclosure at Westwood. They have worked on the trash enclosure at Jeffers Pond. They've worked on a lot of other of our masonry projects, including rebuilding all of the entryway areas for Five Hawks that we had to redo for the fire marshal correction. So they've been responsible for all of those. One of the things that came up that was not included in their estimate was the railings. They honestly don't deal with metalworking, and I'm more than happy that they don't do that, because then we can make sure and get somebody in there that really does well with that. I'd rather someone admit to me ahead of time that that's not their forte.
Okay, and all the prices you received were not to exceed with the same insurance requirements, guarantees of work, et cetera?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Just curious, I know we typically try to have like 3 bids for RFPs. Would you ever open the RFP or extend the period so we try to get a 3rd bid?
I did extend this one by a couple of extra days through the weekend, and I still did not get any interest. I was reaching out to other contractors. None of them got back to me. So I was a little bit surprised on that.
Yeah.
I honestly thought we'd have at least 4 or 5 different companies coming out. But these were the 2, and I'm happy that these 2 did, because they are definitely our more reliable partners in a lot of different things.
Good evening. So you've worked with both of these did you say you worked with?
I've
or
worked
we
with
have
both
worked
of
with
the
both
companies
with-
on several
okay,
projects, yes.
Great. And the one that doesn't do the railings, like you said, is that the one that came in substantially lower? So if we need to add on to that,
I'll need
it's
to add on a
still-
few things. I thoroughly expect with the difference between all the bids that I'll have some type of a change order. This is pretty typical for construction projects.
Yeah.
But I already know I'm gonna have to add in for the railings and any of the other metalwork. So the other type of metalwork would be where where we have the bumpers attached onto the loading dock. We attach those with metal railings. So it's like an L-shaped bracket that sits right there in front that the bumper is attached to. So those types of things and the railings themselves, I'll contract with a separate company. And I'll make sure that it's round numbers, it should be between $30,000 and $50,000 for those 2. So if we're looking at total overall costs, we're still gonna be less than $500,000 for everything.
So with the difference there, so if that's 500, say, versus the one that came in about $1 million, so that's a $500,000 difference. Is there any concern on your part about quality or anything? I mean, that's a huge gap.
It's a huge difference, and like I mentioned, one of the things that was a deciding factor for me was actually the work they have done in the district
Sure.
before. Any of you get a chance, if you go and look at the Westwood garbage enclosure, it looks good. I mean, it's not just a case of, the cracking is at a minimum. The walls are straight. They're clean, it's a clean work. So I trust that, and one of the things, I talked with Dr. Thomas about this too, one of the things that we could do if we decide to say, okay, maybe we could do all 3 of these, I would do one of the projects first, and then talk to them about, if this project is as good as I expect it to be, then I would really love to award you these other 2 projects later on in the summer.
Would that change anything about the cost or anything with
It shouldn't.
terms of the
If we
RFP?
agree about it ahead of time, it shouldn't. It may add 3%. It shouldn't be a huge amount, unless something really weird happens to the cost of concrete, which if it did, then we would just say, hey, let's hold off on those. Or get an updated estimate and then bring that to all of you again. Yeah, any change of that substance, I would want to make sure and bring forward.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Moving on. Thank you, Director Powers.
Thank you.
I almost called you doctor. I give you an upgrade. Next up is the Achievement and Integration Plan. This is report only, and board action will be requested at the March meeting. Superintendent Thomas?
Okay, thank you all. So this evening, I'm going to walk over, review some of the proposed changes for the achievement and integration planning phase for our next year's grant. And, I've shared this, ahead of time, and all the goals and strategies at the end, I'm not going to obviously read through those. I just wanted to make sure I captured that for the general public so they could take the time to read through that. But I'll go through a couple of these opening slides. Our purpose for the A&I funding is to promote racial and economic integration, increase student achievement, expediting equitable access to educational opportunities, and reducing academic disparities. Now, this is taken directly from, our A&I website here at the state. We have the guiding statutes that governs a lot of our work here around this body of funding. A couple of things in terms of eligibility. You can be a racially isolated district, which is an enrollment of students from protected classes exceeding adjoining districts by 20% or more. Adjoining with district borders or RIS schools within a district, and you can have a voluntary process as well. And for us, we have adjoining borders with Jordan, Shakopee, and based upon enrollment with regards to their total enrollment of students of color in our population. And so we've historically had partnerships with among those districts. ANI is funded through both state aid as well as 30% into local levy. We receive just under $1 million in state aid, and it's for us, that aid has continually gone up since we've received it several years ago. We just received our estimates for next year, and so that's part of the reason why I'm holding on some of the budget, because we weren't too sure where our dollars were going to be coming in. But that'll be something that I'll be sharing in terms of a spreadsheet or a template that we did several years ago. We'll be doing the same template when I bring it back for you all in March, reflecting the new revenue that's coming in. Good news is that the revenue that we are currently receiving, what's forecasted for next year is about $10,000 or maybe just a touch over $10,000 more next year in our ANI eligibility. Still, I think hovering around that $970,000 mark, right around that dollar mark. Allowable uses for instructional supports and interventions for our kids based upon disproportionality achievement data. That's where we would identify students who would be eligible for the usage of the resources. We can use it for professional learning for our staff, as well as family engagement and community partnerships to include not only our families, but also some of the students that we serve as well. That was another part of our inter-district inter-district work with neighboring school districts. And then those, and that's the last bullet there, the integration and access related activities with our partnering districts, which has been something pretty significant for us here in the South Metro. In terms of how this work is aligned, our new Comprehensive Achievement in Civic Readiness, CACR, which is the updated version of the world's best workforce, that's where this resource is directly aligned in terms of getting outcomes as measured by that. That's something that we deliver to the school board in November each year. That's where we also do the update on the goals, the progress on the goals each year as well. And here you have where our CACR emphasizes, and I know we talked a little bit about this past fall, but what we see from our last fall data is that obviously early literacy, this is something that many districts are focusing in on with regards to the READ Act. We know that attendance, particularly for some of our student subgroups, is an area of focus for us. And then the disparate access to rigorous coursework and career pathway programming, that's another area that we want to make sure that aligns with the statute, but also in what we are seeing in terms of our practices. When you take a look at our current plan versus our proposed plan, we're going to build on what we know is having some impacts for our families and for our students. So on the left-hand column here, you see our current planning that's occurring in our district. And then on the right-hand side here, you'll see some proposed areas of focus on where we will put our energies in for next year. And some of those bold areas, just to kind of call out some some really strong focuses. So really looking at our data and disaggregating that as required by CACR and how we're going to resource supports around what we're seeing in terms of some of the gaps. Really emphasizing those measurable academic outcomes and success for kids that we can see based upon some of the data. As I noted earlier, that early focus on literacy. Granted, that's a district-wide initiative, probably a statewide initiative, but it is an area for us that we know that we want to make sure that we get most of our resources invested in, because that's those foundational years for our students to compound their learning, exponentially over their course of their high school career. Access and persistent to completion for some of that CTE, MinCaps, advanced learning based upon historical representation on data and how kids are doing. So we want to make sure we're focusing some resources there. High quality access to learning and instruction for our staff. Intentionally tied engagement and belonging outcomes. A lot of this comes with our committed and caring conversations work that we've done with regards to some of our students across multiple districts. And then we've also hosted some language-specific family engagement nights also to ensure that there's access and understanding and overcoming some of the barriers historically that we may have experienced with some of our families. And then lastly, tying a lot of what we're doing directly to some of our instructional priorities and student results. Again, a lot of this work that we started a couple years ago of aligning our work at the building level with our new strategic plan. This is also something that we are going to be focusing in on with next year, the next cycle for the 3-year cycle of the A&I plan. Putting resources in the areas for the greatest impact. Again, those foundational years of literacy are key for us. We know that reading is the backbone for all other disciplines, and so there will be a heavy emphasis there as a district, but also looking at any of our disparate data that comes through our reviews to make sure that we're putting resources into the kids who need it most there. And one of the things that we talked about, and this is some of the feedback that we received from the Teaching and Learning Committee too, is we had several goals and strategies in our last plan, and we're narrowing it down and sharpening our focus to doing what we knew was working and carrying a lot of that work forward versus just doing more. Ensuring that our students have access to high quality instruction and opportunities of learning. Really finding out ways that we can really strengthen some of the training of our staff so that they know how to meet some of those unique learning needs of our students. Aligning more with our CACR, which is new and updated from World's Best Workforce from the last 3-year cycle that we have. And then lastly, we did not have our new strategic plan in that last cycle, and so the new strategic plan will also be an area that we want to make sure that we're adhering to. I won't be reading every single goal. The online portal for A&I funding is kind of a, forgive me, MDE, it's kind of a clunky portal. And so what I did, I just cut and pasted directly from the online portal and put it into a Word doc. And so the goal 1, the goal type, strategy name, and type of strategy are language directly from the portal. The narrative around the goal 1 up top is our narrative, and then the narrative description is our narrative. But know that the achievement disparity goal, for example, under goal type, there's categories that you have to code how each goal aligns to the MDE templates. And so that's all taken directly from their template. So what you have there are goal 1, and then you'll see strategy 1.1, 1.2, et cetera, aligning to goal 1 all throughout. Strategy 2, or goal 2, similarly 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, et cetera, and then all the way through to our last goal. Just to give you a sense of where we're at in this current year and some of how we would be rolling forward with some of our work for next year. Go back here. Sorry, this didn't port over well. Kind of cut off at the bottom. I actually brought a paper copy too, but just so you can see how it's currently allocated, and we would have a lot of carryover of some similar programming with sharper focuses with the goals that you saw included. But our student success coaches, or our academic paras, are a new investment this year that we converted some of the administrative overhead, and so you just heard a little bit about that a couple of weeks ago. It took us a while to get folks hired into those positions, unfortunately, but the time that they've been here, we are starting to see a really strong reception, not only from the students, but also from our staff and our families of those students getting that additional support. We have 6 cultural liaisons with our dominant language groups that will be represented. We have portions of our elementary and secondary deans that are currently covered. Our deans play a critical role in our student assistance teams or problem-solving teams. They are regularly looking at data and finding ways to bridge some of that support for the academic and behavioral needs of our students so that they can keep them on track. We have a category of translation and interpretation that would also carry forward. Food resources for some of our family engagement evenings that we sponsor. Tutoring and mentoring block for some of our students. Transportation for our student events that we host a couple of times throughout the year. A portion of our aid in partnership with the statutes that govern American Indian programming here in the state of Minnesota. We have used some of this integration aid to pay for a portion of some of our Indian education coordinator, as well as some of the PD that gets done specifically around our AIEA grant, our American Indian Education Aid Grant, sorry. We have some pre-K outreach that we piloted this year, really finding ways that we can get families earlier so that we don't have those barriers to begin with, that we can begin to find ways to connect with families to get them engaged in our district. And then we have a line for contracted supports and consultants that would come in to do any type of training or support for our students, guest speakers at some of our student events as well. And then what's not showing up at the very bottom is the benefits actually that go along with the FTE that's listed above there. So generally speaking, this is what we had back in 23. We revised some of that for this current budget year, so you can see what that looks like, and I'll be bringing something similar now that we understand what our dollar thresholds will be, and making adjustments as we need to moving forward. So with that, I will stop, and Chair, turn it back to the board.
Very good. Board questions, board discussion? Director Mason?
I have a couple things. I think one of the requirements is to provide key indicators of progress and assess if the strategies are working.
Yep.
And I don't feel like I really got that out of the narrative description. I guess I would like to see something a little bit more concise.
There will be, there
Okay.
will be KIPs that will be part of the March presentation to you all.
Okay.
We'll be baselining the year of 27. The fall of 26 will be our new established 3-year baseline. And then we're working through the metrics roll-ups right now as to what those would cascade to be over the next 3 years. But yep, there will be KIPs.
Okay.
And that's part of that online template. And when I tried cutting and pasting that, you really lose a lot. And versus replicating all of that, we'll just show that page or whatever on MDE's website for the KIPs.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be helpful, and just to even tie back some of these positions, what you listed on the spreadsheet, how they relate to each goal would be helpful, or each strategy for me, so.
Anyone else?
Yeah, thank you. So I have a question. As I'm reading through, MDE has a really great click to link about frequently asked questions on their website. And I believe I discovered this back back in 2023 when we were reviewing this plan and developing this plan at the same time. And the one thing that I just read is that it basically says you can't simply add programs, initiatives, or staff positions to your achievement and integration plan if your district is already implementing them. Instead, think about how your plan can expand the scope of your current efforts by increasing their capacity to reduce these disparities and increase outcomes. My concern is that a lot of this is really focused on, I felt like it was focused on the READ Act and things that we're already doing. And so I guess are we able to do that? I mean,
Yeah,
given
we
the
can.
fact
So,
that,
yeah, so Director Atkinson, the points that you were reading from the Q&A really is about the distinction between supplementing versus supplanting. We couldn't take all of READ Act and cover it with A&I funding, but we can supplement what we're doing with READ Act, specifically as it pertains to how we're triaging some of the disparate data that we see and finding very different kind of interventions that we would utilize that we may not be able to afford and or have in place, generally speaking, across the district. Similarly, what we've done with some of our dean roles, they've expanded their roles with the support of A&I funding, and so we've also increased some of that time so we could supplement that, but we didn't supplant it. So that's the distinction that MDE wants us to be mindful of.
okay. And then I think something that I think I would like us to, two things I'd like us to be mindful is that, you know, the plan is not, it's not meant to segregate students. And I think we've had a couple incidents over the past 3 years where that has happened, and I know it's been addressed. And I think the thing that my biggest concern is, and when we go back to 2023, I was the only board member that did not support the plan that was presented. And I think we can now look back 3 years and say, was the plan that we presented, was it effective? And I went back and I pulled our, you know, our achievement by race, by students, and in almost every single category, we've gone down in proficiency. And so I look at this, and it's $3 million, so it's $1 million every year that is really supposed to be dialed in and helping our students learn. When I read this whole thing, I didn't see any big, like, wow of anything we're doing different. And so I just, maybe it needs to be in the KIPs, like you were mentioning, Director Mason, of like, what are the deans going to be doing differently? If we're going to still fund the deans, what are they doing differently? The culture liaisons, if we're still going to fund the culture liaisons, which I fully support, what are we doing differently? Because it's really hard to believe that we spent all this money and we widen the achievement gap.
Well, and-
It hasn't done what it's supposed to do.
Yeah,
And
I would
it's
say
frustrating, I'd
also
say.
you know, what we're measuring in terms of the success is the goals that were submitted that we present on each fall. And those have been making adequate progress around the goals that we have been approved by MDE and that were approved by the board. So that's the metric that we use to measure the overall success of the investments that we're making. You know, obviously with $1 million, you're not going to sit here and be able to boil the entire ocean. But the targeted areas and the goals that we set, that's where we'll be looking at, and that's what we report on every fall. So similarly, going forward with a new 3-year cycle, the KIPs, that format that we have currently right now, that's still the same format that we'll carry forward. We have KIPs in our current plan, so I'm going to be clear about that. There will be KIPs dialed in for this new 3-year cycle. And to your point, and perhaps, you know, the thoughts of others, yeah, we want to make sure that what you're seeing here is aligned much more tighter to some of our CACR work that's new for us, as well as our strat plan, generally speaking. And then with the goals that will be set along those KIPs, that's what we'll be reporting back to the board each year or each fall.
So I went back and I looked at the November CACR report, and it said that we had a goal of MCU reading assessment that would increase from 65% in 2024 to 67% and 25%. And it says goal not met. 55% of our students met and exceeded an MCA.
Yeah, there were some that were not hitting where we wanted to be hitting, yep, as we reported to you last fall.
So that's where I'm
Absolutely.
challenged to understand the money
And
that
I
we
would say the
spent.
same challenge, Director Atkinson, is across the board for our whole district and many other districts. We set goals around multiple areas that we want to accomplish. And there are going to be some areas that we are coming up short, some areas that we may be exceeding. And so where we're coming up short, we want to understand, okay, what happened? So if that was our goal last year, and we have a similar, obviously, you know, increasing student academic performance is going to be a carry-through goal. We want to know what exactly happened with that particular group of students that we're serving in that narrow band supported through A&I funding that we might need to transform or transition to a different focus for this upcoming 3-year cycle. Because maybe that strategy that we had wasn't getting the outcome that we wanted to get. So what's our different strategy to meeting those goals for our kids in the new cycle?
Yeah, and I
You know.
guess, for me, that's not coming through in this presentation. So I think I just need a little bit more content to what that is. What are we doing differently so that we can support all students? Because there's a lot of flexibility in this plan as far as meeting the needs of all students from a racially and socioeconomic standpoint. So I think when all students achieve at their highest level and they're getting the resources they need, it's going to bring everybody up. And so that's the part that I think is missing, is that I'm not reading within the plan. So I look forward to learning more about what you bring forward in March.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Chair Boyan, I have a
Director
question.
Olson.
Dr. Thomas, can you go back one slide, please, if you don't mind? Yeah, right there. The student success coaches, those are new, correct?
Yes, those are new this year.
And those are meant to help with academic
Yes. And so-
success and rigor and all of that, three
Yeah,
positions.
so those three individuals work very closely with Dr. Zunbush and Ms. Maloney to identify students in one of three of our schools that we targeted. This is what we shared a couple weeks ago. And within that bandwidth of students that they're supporting, putting together individual learning plans for those kids to help accelerate those gaps that they might be experiencing. So yes, that's what those individuals are designed to do.
And the deans, both elementary and secondary, those deans, part of their roles will be dedicated to what's in this plan and the goals in the plan.
Yes, yeah, and specifically, one of the things I will admit, Director Atkinson brought this point up around the READ Act and focusing on K-3. There is going to be a heavy emphasis on some of those younger years, and then really looking at some targeted support at the high school or secondary level with some of our MinCap, CTE, et cetera. But yes, we want to make sure that if we can identify the support gaps early enough with our students, albeit academic or some of the behavioral connection points to student engagement points at a younger level, the more successful those kids will be as they go longer into their career. So yes, talking about the deans at both elementary and secondary, like I said, they are part of our student assistance teams, or it's called various things. Each school has a different group, but they sit with a lot of the related services staff. So some teachers, counselors, social workers, deans, and they're triaging, the outcomes of kids. And so they will kind of do stoplight protocols. For example, here's a group of red kids, yellow kids, green kids, et cetera. We're going to focus in on these, group of yellow students. We're going to do this intervention, and maybe some of our more, significantly disconnected or disengaged students in that red zone. Maybe we're looking at a very different, modality of how we're going to engage them. But our deans play an instrumental role in both the academic and behavioral engagement of our students. That is something that we and definitely could have some of our principals speak to that, come March. But I did meet with our principals earlier this fall just to get a better understanding as we were looking at a new 3-year cycle. And my push into our leadership team has been, how are we really driving home, the results for our kids, both engagement as well as academics for our students. And so that was part of the feedback that I received, namely from our elementary principals, in terms of how some of that changed, because that was the one area that we supplemented more, because they've not historically had deans at every building. And I would also say, and I don't want to put words in all of our principals' mouths that might be here, but in conversations with a couple of them, and I won't name the individual, but we have a very veteran principal who shared with me when we provided some additional support to expand a dean at every one of our elementary campuses, is that now I feel like I can be more of an instructional leader versus managing the building. And that's a pretty profound statement from someone who's been around the block many a time and getting great outcomes. And you all have seen this principal present a few times here, some remarkable work that the principal and their staff are doing. We want to see more of that. And we also know that we have some areas that we can continue to, make investments for improvement based upon our learning. So hope that gives more context to your question.
It does, thank you. And so with the new coaches, and, a little bit more of a focus, from the dean perspective or time, I should say. And then like the tutoring and mentoring, which I think is new.
And we've had that.
We've had
So
that,
some of that
okay.
has been through the summer support
Yeah,
for
right.
students that get some identification. Yep, and so that's where we can do some partnering with our own staff, also through community ed staff, as well as some third-party partnerships as well that can provide that academic support, some of that bridging work. We are going to try a little bit different of a model this summer. And looking at ways that we can leverage some of those third-party partnerships where we can access perhaps a block of tutoring services so that based upon referrals, we can work with families to help arrange kind of custom schedules that fit for the family's needs that may be at the school site, could be at a church, could be at a library, so or maybe at their dinner table. So we're going to explore a little bit more autonomy with how we can customize that, because one of the things that we have found is that when we have offered extended learning opportunities for our families and for our students, and dare I say some of our staff, we just don't get a lot of takers. And unfortunately, when we had a more robust kind of summer bridge academic program, we were able to utilize some of our ESSER monies, which provided transportation. Without transportation, there is just no participation. And last year was our first kind of hybrid approach to try to doing something, and there's very little. I think we had like 40 students. So the response without transportation is significant. And so we thought, well, let's try, a little bit more of a customizable approach that might be a little bit more family-friendly this summer, because we know that at best we might get a small, swath of students who have the ability to come to some of our campuses over the summer, largely in partnership with community ed, with fee-based, and then obviously through financial eligibility status, we can supplement those resources and those fees for those families. But that plus some other opportunities, I think, we're going to see if that is the right mix. And I think that's what it goes down to. There is no magic wand to say this is the thing that's going to work for every student. So we do have to, we're dealing with young people and families whose needs ebb and flow, and the dynamics of families and students can change, from 1 month to the next. And so we want to try to meet them where they're at and find different solutions. If the models that we've had, which tend to fall more traditionally, aren't meeting the needs or aren't providing the access, then we have to look a little differently at this and how we would approach it, going forward. And that's part of what we're trying to do, with the new 3-year cycle as well, is that carry forward what we know has been, powerful for our students and our families, but then also find opportunities for us to be able to expand some of those innovative ways to connect with our kids and our families.
Thank you very much. Look forward to March.
I think just listening to your last statements, Dr. Thomas, I think however the teachers and staff can continue to encourage the partnership with families. The going back to student success, the straightest line is between the student and the teacher, and that includes the parents, the families. And so however we can continue to encourage and foster those relationships between the classroom and home as much as possible to offer the supports that maybe financially we aren't in a position to be able to offer all the supports that we'd like to. So continuing to encourage that partnership and that relationship.
Director Bolin, I have just one thing to add.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'll
Yeah.
make it brief. Dr. Thomas, I was reading another district's plan, and one of the examples they gave, and I don't know, do we do BizTown here in our district?
Yeah, we do have BizTown.
Oh, okay, I wasn't sure if we do or not, but that's one of the things that they have on their Achievement and Integration Plan is to have the students attend BizTown, and so that all students can gain leadership abilities. And so those are the kind of things where, to me, I feel like those are things that are different and innovative, where it's helping kids build their leadership skills. And
Absolutely.
as we're continuing to be challenged with resources, whether it's those type of field trips and experiences, that it's just, like I said, doing things differently, that we can see and say, you know, see the results, and also know that this money is being put to work
Yeah.
in the right way.
Well, one of the things that we're looking at, so outside of the elementary version of the BizTown model, is partnering with one of our local nonprofits to enhance our high school model. That would be the equivalent. And that's something that our kids, and several of you who have gone out to the high school, particularly our MinCaps, if I'm not in MinCaps, can we create some other overall access point for kids to understand just entrepreneurship? And so they have a commensurate program. So that is one area that we'll be focusing on with some of our new 3-year cycle resources outside of the elementary BizTown model.
Yes, thank you. So I think providing more examples like that would be helpful for us to understand, for me personally to understand the plan. So thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Next up on the agenda is the 2026 and 27 program and staffing additions and reductions discussion. This is discussion topic only, and Executive Director of Administrative Services, Cothern. Executive Director of Business Services, Ryder. Thank you for presenting tonight.
Good evening, Chair Bullion,
evening.
Superintendent Thomas, and other directors. We are going to be going over some budget and staffing alignment updates for you this evening. I am up here, but all my other 2 colleagues are going to step in if need be as well to answer any questions at the end of the presentation here. So tonight we want to go over about some process and alignment. And just need to be clear that none of these are finalized staffing decisions. What has occurred to date is an internal modeling and early engagement around budget parameters. Just so everybody's aware, there was an effort on my part to engage early so that we could preserve as much programming and stability as possible. But if my communication sequence created confusion, I can definitely improve that. But the intent was to start engaging conversations, not to preempt the board. So tonight we're going to talk about our alignment process and ensuring we are working within the guardrails that you have established. So we're going to do some budget adjustment overviews, some of the guiding priorities that drive the decisions, and then the next steps to get us to the final board action. So we'll start with the board-approved budget priorities. We understand that these aren't a verbatim to the board-approved priorities, but the purpose of the slide was to capture the essence of the priorities under the academic excellence, to maintain class size targets to support personalized learning, as well as to maintain and enhance differentiation and enrichment programming. Under the resource optimization, we wanted to streamline the transportation operations, evaluate our partnerships to maximize cost savings, and maintain a structurally balanced budget, and strive to maintain the minimum 8% unassigned general fund balance. And every modeling conversations with building leaders has began with these priorities in mind. So as far as the historical budget adjustments, one thing that kind of jumped out to me when I was going through this was this isn't a new conversation for you guys, unfortunately, as well as for the district administrators that have been here. So one of the things I wanted to try to do when you look at 24, 25, 25, 26, and then 26, 27 was to try to, since I'm new, I wanted to try to get an understanding of kind of where we're at and where we were. So I wanted to try to find some contextual similarities to where we are now and what some previous years have looked like. So started looking back, went as far back as 2016 and 17, which next year will make it a decade. And right now I saw that in 2017-18, we had an enrollment of 8,606 students with a staff count of 1,134. And currently, right now, we have an enrollment of 8,568, so 38 less students and a staff count of 1,131, so 3 less staff. So fairly comparable to where we were in 2018. And then I looked even a year before that, in 2017, we had an enrollment of 8,386 and a staff count of 1,098. And based on what we're kind of seeing for next year with enrollment and staff count, I'm guessing that we're going to be right around those same numbers we were in 2016, 2017. So 10 years later, pretty much gonna match where we were, and like I said, in 2018, pretty much where we were at, right now. So as you can tell that we've made some structural adjustments, are underway, that we've had some conversations. But the reality is that we're gonna do some additional alignment, is required. And overall, from what I can tell, the district has had some similar numbers to those of 8 to 10 years ago in both enrollment and staff count. We're still refining some of these scenarios, and we'll bring those forward in March to ensure explicit alignment before any decisions, final decisions are made. The next, we have our buckets of where we're looking at trying to make those alignments and adjustments. The elementary site consolidation of the 1.69 million, the majority of this comes from the repurposing of the Westwood and the staffing realignments that will come with that. At the middle school, the 595,000, and the high school at 765,000. From the conversations we've had with building leaders, they were given these dollar targets. These weren't directives to reduce FTE. These were just targets that were established to kind of start the brainstorming process. At the DSC here at the District Services Center, $800,000. These are due to departmental reductions and efficiencies within each department that we're asked to take a look at how they can be more efficient within their own departments. Athletics and activities at $100,000, we asked them to try to start looking and find areas where they could be more efficient in both athletics and activities, as well as some other areas under review currently, such as the revenue and compensatory adjustments, totaling the 4.15. Once again, these are targets for alignment. These are not finalized position reductions. They are part of our scenario modeling, and we are still having ongoing conversations that you're going to see here on the next slide. And our early discussions were meant for modeling and brainstorming, not necessarily decision making. So our timeline and decision points. We're here today at the study session to go over this. Some key staffing meetings we're going to be having over the next few months. We'll have a secondary staffing, our second one with our middle school and high school group on the 26th. March 3rd, 10th, and 17th, we meet with the elementary group on a weekly basis to have meetings with them. March 12th, we will have another secondary staffing meeting to finalize some of the decisions at that point in time. March 20th is when staff are going to be notified of any tentative ULAs or non-renewals. And then the two board meetings for the month of March on the 9th, the transportation RFP, and then another budget update, as well as then on the 23rd, that's when you will have the study session and another staffing and budget update. Then you move into April, you'll have to then take action on the April 13th board meeting for the non-renewals and ULAs. And then on the 24th, that's when we would give our tentative staff assignments for the 26-27 staff assignments. And then at April 27th, it's another board study session. May moves into more of a budget updates, and then on the May 18th, that's where then you would review the preliminary and final budget and final actions on our ULAs. And then June 8th is the action on the final budget. And so just kind of going off of that timeline, in my experience, our internal modeling has preceded final board action. What may feel different this year is the earlier engagement of the building leaders in brainstorming some of these cost containment strategies. Part of that simply is because of the undertaking of repurposing a school, along with needing to make a third straight year of significant reductions. From what I could tell in prior years, it appeared to me that some internal modeling discussions happened earlier, but I think probably what feels different is the timing of that communication this year. And once again, I understand the concern around that communication cadence. Once again, it was not my intent to circumvent board discussion. The information shared with building leaders was part of an internal programmatic and budget modeling, not necessarily approved staffing reductions, and that distinction may not have been as clear externally as it could have been. And in hindsight, I do see and understand a more explicit preview to the board around programmatic shifts and upcoming conversations with site leaders around budgetary brainstorming, and I'm sure that would have been helpful, and that is something I can improve moving forward. But as you can see by the timeline, that all staff notifications are tentative until the board takes action on those in May and then finally in June. Just want to put a plug in for our town hall meeting coming up this Wednesday from 6 to 7:30 here at the District Service Center. And we welcome all people to come and join us for those, where we will be having more in-depth conversations and getting some feedback from the community. With that, what questions can the three of us answer for you?
Thank you, directors. Any questions?
I have a list. Anyone else? I think, first of all, appreciate the comments. I think we've probably, all of us as board members have heard a lot of noise from the community and parents and students around some of the eliminations, and I think specifically probably mostly the elementary, so around like fifth grade ski field trips and reduction in PE time and reduction in media specialists and shift to ESTEM, and then I think also the reduction in track and field day I've heard. So maybe some of these are rumors, I'm not sure, but I'm just curious, how do those, I think I'm trying to understand, are those part of budget cuts, or are they just shifts and strategies and, trying to understand sort of the cost savings in some of those, and do they fall into that elementary bucket, I guess?
Sure. Thank you, Director Mason. The couple of, I'm going to kind of split up the question that you had to park the specialist model, and I'll let Dr. Anderson speak to that a little bit. But with regards to some of the field trip experiences that you mentioned there, it was very clear by the board this year that you wanted us to find ways that we could ensure that we would manage our expenditures. I've heard it repeatedly. And part of our efforts to doing that, and we shared this at one of our board meetings, is that we've got staff under contract. We're not eliminating positions this current school year so that we didn't have to go into fund balance, et cetera, when we're doing the mid-year budget adjustments. But we had to look at other ways that we could mitigate our expenditures. And so that's part of what we shared with all of our learning leaders, is to assess the programmatic needs of your department and or your schools and find ways that you can contain costs. For sure, for this year, to slow our spending down. Director Mason, I think you even asked one of our early fall meetings about the delta and the change that we saw in some of our expenditures. Well, part of that is containing our costs. And outside of staff, which make up 80%, everything else is ancillary. So this is where we have the autonomy to make decisions that can actually impact this current budget. It was also very clear by the board that you wanted us to contain transportation costs. We know that those have really been accelerating. And so, for example, the field day that we've hosted at the high school, which I want to say, great opportunity. There's nothing wrong with those opportunities, but that was a $9,000 transportation bill. And many of our elementary schools, obviously, they do a type of field day activity at the end of every school year. And so this year, we are containing those $9,000 of expenses with transportation, and fifth grade will participate in a field day experience that will be at their local elementary school. With regards to general field trips, yes, this is another area that our principals can actually contain costs. Field trips are not required. They are great opportunities for students. And great support from our families that might volunteer or chaperone, so we really appreciate that. And it is something at the local building level that buildings determine whether or not they're going to take various trips throughout the school year, every single year. That's something that they do annually. And not every school does the same trips. And so, again, I think there's abilities to contain some of the costs there that, we will entrust our building leaders to make some determinations as to, what they feel is a value to their local community to move forward, or where there's some areas that they can contain. And then I'll just close with this, restating the fact that when we're cutting $4 million from our budget, and planning for $4 million for next year's budget and containing costs this year. And we talked about that we're at a point in our daily lived experience in this district where we're going to feel that. And I had mentioned that if everybody's favorite thing is the thing that you can't cut, then nothing is ever going to get cut. So we are going to experience some pain points. I fully acknowledge that. I foreshadowed that many months ago during multiple conversations, here as well as out in our community. that this is our reality. And certainly, I can appreciate the feedback that some of our families and our staff are having around some of those experiential opportunities. There's some value add. I don't discount that. And when we have to make some tough financial decisions, where are we able to control some of those costs? And unfortunately, those are some of the areas that we have some latitude of doing. And so this is not to say that we don't want to continue adding those experiences for our kids. We will certainly find ways to make sure that we can take learning outside of the classroom, but we also have to be mindful that even within our own strategic plan, and I want to just be very clear about this too, these decisions aren't that we devalue any priority of our strategic plan. But I also want us to be mindful that in the situation that we're in, we are finding ourselves with competing priorities. Or what I've often stated, we're choosing between what's good and what's good for students and staff. And that's a tough place to be. So if we want to emphasize optimizing resources, which comes with managing our expenditures that are within our current control outside of employee contracts, these are some of the decisions that we make. And then we're going to hear critique that, well, you're taking away academic excellence. And if we say, okay, we're going to weight academic excellence, and then we're going to come back to the board to say, we don't know if we can make that 8% fund balance, right? So it's that we've got this real fine balancing act that we are finding ourselves in. And I think our team is working tirelessly trying to ensure that we are maintaining, credible learning experiences both in and outside the classroom, and being mindful that when we make reductions, either containing for this year or future reductions, in upcoming years, that we are at a point where we're going to be impacting the very thing that might be drawing somebody to our district, whatever that one thing might be. And so I just offer that for some additional context to the board and to our community of where we're at, and definitely can understand and appreciate the delicate, conversations that many of our department and building leaders are having. And Dr. Anderson, I'll turn it to you to talk a little bit about some of the, kind of that competing priorities of standards coming in and how we bring balance to a conversation that we started in '23.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Board members, good evening. Appreciate the question. I've received some of those same questions and wonderments, so appreciate being aware of those. To echo Dr. Thomas's points around we're choosing between good and good, that is definitely the case. In the case of this question around 4-day specialist schedule model change, that's a model that moves from a 5-day model to a 4-day rotation. Specialists on the rotation are physical education, art, music, and science, and particularly the emphasis is on E-STEM. That model exists alongside of and in tandem with how we, in a environment where we're cutting or reducing $4 million for the third straight year, responding to higher rigor requests and requirements from the state, and protecting our core academics without cutting deeper into our bandwidth at the classroom model, or at the classroom level. So the strategic plan asks us to think about prioritizing and optimizing resources and doing academic excellence. And this program shift that partners with and goes along with the financial challenges that we have does that. Now, 2 years ago in January of 2024, principals came to the board and presented on specialists program review update. And my understanding that was from January of 2024. Two key priorities that were surfaced in that presentation were maximizing Tier 1 instruction in core academics and providing a more connected experience for staff and kids. And one of the key elements of that is providing consistent adults at each building throughout a student's elementary experience, decreasing and eliminating travel, and again, keeping academic excellence in the core at the forefront. So it's all three things. It's responding to intensity and rigor in science that's asked of us and we're not happy with and satisfied with our results. It's protecting those core academics so that they're not further put under duress. And it's meeting that $4 million reduction without impeding our ability to do the first two strategic priorities of the strategic plan.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate all the context. Thank you. That's helpful. I guess, when I look at, we're always making trade-offs, right? And it's, do we give our students additional movement and PE time or, more E-STEM opportunities or things like that? But I think when I look back to last year's process with the budget, we were presented ongoing, with spreadsheets of cuts down to $9,000, right, from December 2024 on. And I guess we haven't seen any of that as a board yet. So just trying to understand, if we cut this field trip, it costs $9,000, those trade-offs, right? And I think we as a board haven't had the opportunity to weigh in on those trade-offs. So I think it's helpful to understand that. And if the process is going to be different this year, and we're getting these things after, that's fine. I think just trying to understand also then where does that fit into each bucket. So the elementary site consolidation is 1.69 million. I don't see other elementary cuts listed here. So, what's that total of these things? So we can, maybe that will come out later in budget sheets, but that's where my mind was going. And the process looks different this year. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but.
Sure, sorry, I didn't know if you were going to continue. I would just say the one change, when some of you reached out in inquiring about process, is historically we've done a little bit more of an iterative update with the board of kind of where we're going, and there was a direct, whatever we call it, we kind of directional thumbs of acknowledgement, right? And there was much feedback from the board that that thumbs process was not something that the board was going to continue, and that it felt like voting, and that you don't vote on until come June for the final budget. And so these are just kind of checkpoints for awareness of the things that administration was going through within the purview of administration to look at programmatic decisions to meet the goal that the board is saying we need to cut X amount of $1 million a year. And so when we moved to having established board budget priorities, I walked away from that conversation in December with the board chair at the time stating that, if there are going to be board budget priorities A and B, and administration is bringing cuts C, D, and E, to be mindful that they need to do what they need to do, as long as it's within those priorities. And, we could maybe look at 6 on one and half a dozen on the other in terms of the competing priorities piece, because to make reductions that impact the things that people love around the academic experience, one could argue, well, you're cutting academic excellence. But we could also argue, well, we're optimizing resources, or vice versa. So, I'm mindful of that, but the reason why it looks a little different is because with those priorities that were established, and we've been making decisions all within those priorities, at that administrative level. So that's the approach that we took, because we weren't doing the thumbs process any longer. And then ultimately, the board will vote on the total budget to reflect the 4.1 reduction come June, and everything leading up to that. I do know that our team will be bringing some itemized conversations to the board once we work through some of that with our building and department leads as well. And that's part of what Director Cawthorn referred to a couple of slides ago on that timeline. I think tomorrow we're having our second staffing meeting, so we're working through. And so, for example, just to give you just a really quick peek under the hood of those conversations, there will be things that a building or a department is looking to make some reductions in. And as we reflected on some of those reduction thinking alouds, I'll say with some of our building leaders, one of the things that we had to do was pause on a certain thing because I pulled out the board budget priorities and I said, you know what? I think this gets really close to kind of violating this particular priority. I don't think that's going to be something that we're going to be able to support. So that's off limits. You got to work cuts around that thing because that thing, advanced placement or advanced coursework, et cetera, that's a non-negotiable. So we can't look in that space, irrespective of registrations, et cetera. So those are some of the things that we're having in terms of conversations that we're having with our staff, and equally some of our building or our district department leads as well. So some of those itemized components will still be coming to the board with some upcoming checkpoints.
Okay, great, thank you.
And just for a little bit of clarity too, my understanding, and Director Ryder, correct me if I'm wrong, like some of the stuff like the field trips and the ski and the track and field day, those were done for this year to get us to the 8% for 25-26. And so they would not be reflected in that elementary bucket because that's a 26-27 bucket. So like I said, the biggest portion of that bucket is the repurposing of Westwood and what's going to come with the appropriate staffing reductions or, other types of reductions from the repurposing of that building. So I think I'm accurate in saying that, but so the field trips and that kind of stuff would not be reflective in that bucket.
I have a question about the field trips. So it's a hot button thing because it's important to our community. And you guys, when you talk about pain points, I'll be honest with you, the thing I hear the most is you're trying to make this punitive. The levy didn't pass, you're going to do things that hurt. And I guess my question about
I
the
think
field
that's
trips is-
ascribing motive, and that's not fair.
But it is what I hear, Director Olsted. So
I think
have
that's
to share
ascribing motive
that.
on staff, and that's not fair.
Well, I have to share.
You're not
it
in their
because
head.
I'm elected to share what our community shares
And I'm
with
also
me.
elected to share, and that's
Perfect.
not punitive.
Why can't you just let her finish?
Thank you, Director Johnson. Okay.
God.
So for the field trips, my question is, one of our priorities is community partnerships. And so I guess my question is like, the thing that has been asked of me the most is, when these major changes that are made that are important to our community, why aren't we going to the parents and saying, will you pay an extra $5 per kid so that we can fund the buses? I think any parent who, especially the ski field trip, that one, and it is not for, because they just had their field trip, the ski field trip is my
They
understanding.
just finished.
Yeah, they just finished it. So this is for next year. We're hearing about the ski field trip.
Right.
So if we want to talk specifically about the ski field trip, that goes against our strategic plan. It goes against our board budget priorities because it says allocate more resources directly to the classroom instruction and student learning. And as I've talked to teachers in our district, there are kids in our district who will never set their feet in skis ever. Parents don't ski, they don't have the resources. We are giving our students an opportunity outside the classroom to do something that's a lifelong skill. And those are memorable experiences. They learn multiple things that they can never learn in the classroom. So I step back and I say, why are we taking away things from students where they learn, whether it's things in the classroom or lifelong skills? So that goes against our board budget priorities. So I appreciate you saying you've taken things off the table, but I'm very challenged by that. Because then we continue to hear rumblings and rumors that we're cutting staff. We've been asked to cut $900,000 worth of staff at the high school. And that's the exact opposite of what our board budget priorities are. And I'm sorry if I'm being candid, but it's really frustrating when this information comes to us. I'm looking at an email I sent on February 6th asking a multitude of questions about these specialist model changes, and I never got a response. So if you'd like, I could sit here for the next 45 minutes and ask my questions, but I just don't, I'm really frustrated with this whole process because I I don't feel it's been very transparent to our board or to our community. And I think if there was better communication around the the specialist model changes, I think a lot of it would make sense. But I think it's that lack of communication and hearing these things, rumblings and rumors through the telephone change, is that why there's so much frustration. And so I think I personally would like to see a pause on all of this and us get a better understanding of like what is being communicated in our buildings.
Director Atkinson, if I may, I hear what you just said, and it's, the concerns are understandable when, as board members, when we hear from community members, asking, why is this happening? Why is that happening? We're in a unique position as board members, as school board members, living in our communities, having community members reach to us. My kids are now graduated, so I have a little bit less of in class or, in the school, maybe connection. So I really feel for those of you with students in the schools. You hear more. Your peers are talking about all these different things. And I just want to, the thing that I want to just add, and then we can allow the district team to respond in however they'd like, but we are not in the programmatic. We don't, as board members, we don't handle those operational decisions or the programmatic decisions. We tell them they have to cut this amount. And so, yes, we have established board goals. And I understand you're shaking your head, but we are not in those day-to-day decisions.
Director Bullion, respectfully, I'd agree with you, but they're not following our BARD budget goals, our priorities.
I would disagree with that.
That's where I'm very challenged, is that it doesn't follow the priorities. It also doesn't follow our strategic plan. So
Are you in those meetings?
I was hoping that we were going to come here tonight and hear how these proposed changes, very specifically not by building, but in general, how do these changes align with our strategic plan?
Respectfully, I will
we
say
have
one
not
more
heard
thing,
that,
Director
so-
Atkinson. Everything that the district operates off on, how the district operates is based on board decisions of past. The way the superintendent and his team is operating the district is based on board decision.
I don't see that. I mean, I've said over and over again that the board, we report to our community. These are our community schools. These are community decisions. We represent our community.
Absolutely, we do.
We are the what and the why of what happens in our district. Admin is the how of executing.
Absolutely.
So help me understand how changing field trips is the what and the why. That does,
Director Atkinson,
So
we have 4 million of cut,
I understand,
over 4 million.
and I've been
3 years in a row.
I understand, but I'm not
We've
seeing
been
the
cutting
cuts. I'm not
since
seeing the cuts.
2020, so I've been
You're
around
not
long
seeing the
enough.
cuts? Is that a serious statement?
I'm not seeing the priorities and what our community would like to see regarding cuts.
If I may,
Priorities.
I
It's about
actually agree with the
priorities.
principle that the board sets the direction and the administration executes. It means the board should be equally cautious, and I think it is incredibly reckless to tell the board or to tell the district that they are being irresponsible or that this is punitive. That is an incredibly reckless statement, and I think that you should retract that and apologize. But what concerns me is the suggestion that we can identify broad staffing reductions without fully understanding what the operational impact of those reductions are going to be. I don't know that. You don't know that. You know who does know that? The district. So when we give them those budget priorities and we tell them these are the parameters, I trust that they are working within those parameters.
I think respectfully, I don't know that when we set budget priorities, my understanding was not that we wouldn't have insight like we did last year on like the cuts that we went through and, yes, no, however that went. And again, there are trade-offs, right? This process is fun for nobody. But I think it looks different than it did last year, and it was not my understanding that that process would be different. So that's where it took me a little bit off guard.
If I may, the goal was to reduce by 4.15 million, is that correct?
Correct.
Is what you're proposing right now? Does that meet that $4.15 million target? Or,
The large buckets does, yeah.
okay,
It meets the 4.1.
okay, good to know, thank you.
If I may.
Yeah, Director France.
So obviously, none of these administrators were here a year or 2 years ago. And one of the things that is definitely different between this year and last year is that last year we had gone out for a referendum, and there was a lot of detailed planning going into that referendum. And there was also a detailed, information come very early on to say, listen, if this referendum doesn't pass, all these things were going to have to be cut. And so the plan that was actually introduced in January 2025 was, and also the decisions in December 2024 were actually to give the administration at that time the ability to start that planning, since in January, registration was opening. And so certain decisions need to be made by the board, and they were made in the December board meeting prior to that. But I think the referendum had a huge impact, and its lack of passing on the expedited process of what was going to have to be cut, because there were going to have to be some immediate cuts. And we were trying desperately to communicate that to the community. Unfortunately, there was a tremendous amount of mis and disinformation also, for whatever reason. And therefore, the cuts were expedited, therefore the process was different. Typically, in every year that I've been here, and you obviously don't have that opportunity to go back, that the discussion started exactly the way they are right now, where the board agreed to the aggregate of the budget cut, and then sent the direction to the administration and to the staff through the superintendent to determine how those cuts were going to occur. And that obviously does come with many iterative discussions with the individual buildings, with staff, departments, et cetera, to make sure that they understand the pros and cons of each one of those budget reductions. So as the legacy member here, I don't see a difference this year compared to other years. But last year was a unique year because of that referendum. So maybe that helps, because I know some things are being brought up about consistency, and none of you were here.
Yeah, I mean, I think somebody referenced that these conversations aren't easy. Nobody enjoys them. I think one of the things I looked at the presentation from last year that was given on this day last year. I think some of the stuff that was in that presentation, like for example, one of the things I believe was brought, that there was an allowment to increase the minimum class size for electives, right? So they attached that to an FTE, that a certain FTE was going to be attached to that. There was an allotment for increasing the target, I believe, by maybe 2 at the elementary level, and they attached an FTE to that. For us this year, those aren't possible because we can't increase the targets. That's been, a board priority. So we had to look at it a little bit broader this year than they did last year. And the other big reason is a lot of the decisions we're making this year are going to directly impact people, and those conversations have not been had with those people who are going to be directly impacted. And so it's my preference to have those conversations with the individuals who are going to be impacted prior to them seeing their name maybe on a consent agenda or something along those lines. So that's where it probably feels a little bit different this year, as I explained, is that we are doing things a little bit differently just because some of the broadness that they were able to use last year, we're not able to use those same, we don't have that available in our toolkit to use this year.
If I may.
Yeah, please. Director Ryder.
Additionally, I would like you to consider the fact that when you have $8.1 million over a 2-year period in reductions, you're going to find that that list that used to contain a lot of things like, terminate this software or eliminate this line item budget for supplies or whatever the case might be, those have been done. There's not much left there. We are down to people. And, as Director Cawthorn mentioned, the fact is that gives us another pause as to how quickly you can lay that out. I'll use my own department, for example. If I were to have a position on there and list that, it's just too obvious. So, just like mine, there are other departments similarly, right? So we need to make sure that we're approaching this and giving the opportunity for staff members to truly understand if they happen to be a position that might show up in more detailed format. And so there's always this push and pull when doing reductions to budgets and the timelines, right? And we had this conversation at senior leadership and the fact that, you can look at the timeline and there's nothing different about the timeline, but how we approach it and that push and pull and when it is that you actually can list things does shift. And this is an example of what's happening this year.
Thank you.
Chair, and just to respond to some of the feedback that perhaps some of you are hearing, it's unfortunate that there are members of our community who take the reality of our financial situation as punishment for their democratic right to vote, however they decide to vote. I think that same rhetoric was shared during the campaign when we decided to go very openly about, if this doesn't pass, these are the types of conversations we're going to have. And that was interpreted as gaslighting. And I said from this dais, and I'll say it again, that is never going to be something that I, as your superintendent, or any leadership, person here that's responsible for a lot of these conversations will ever do. And it's unfortunate that that's how it's perceived or interpreted. But I just want to be very clear, again, with our community, this $4.1 million reduction has nothing to do with the democratic process of voting for a levy or and taking action, yes or no. It has everything to do with balancing the books. And we've been sharing the forecasts. I think Director Ryder and her team have been working around the clock to be as creative and innovative with the funds at our disposal as much as we possibly can. That's legal. And this is the result of where we're at. So this 4.1 is coming from a multitude of realities that we're all facing, separate from any other historical actions, within our community. And I'll just, again, close by saying that I hear you, community, board members. These types of decisions that we're making, as Director Ryder said, the stuff around the edges, the fluff, or whatever you want to call it, the non-student facing, the non-staff facing, those reductions have already been made. And we are at a point, and we're not thrilled about even slowing or pausing field trips. I get it. Those are fun learning opportunities. I don't disagree with how you characterize that, Director Atkinson. And as the board is directing to cut $4.1 million, the thing that people like, and I can't stress this enough, that might be the thing that they love, may get touched. And I'm not suggesting that the ski trips just using that as an example, because I'll hear tomorrow, Michael said only ski trips, so that could be interpreted that way, but it's not. I'm just using that as an example tonight. If our buildings look creatively with partners in the future, with extra fees, passing that on to our families, that's not off the table. But it was something that we needed to contend with for this fiscal year. That was almost the only lever within our control to manage current year expenditures outside of locked and sealed contracts. Can't touch those. So moving forward, yes, our building principals fully understand that there may be some trade-offs, there may be some exploration of innovative funding, etc. That's not off the table. But for right now, for this current school year, yes, things have been slowed so that we could structurally balance the budget, which was an ask of this board. And we've delivered that and then a little bit. And we will strive to do that, and that's what the 4.1 is. That's all part of continuing that for the foreseeable future.
Anyone else have anything else they want to add? Very ahead, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you for your clarification on all this. I appreciate the buckets. I'm a visual person. I know this might be a question more for you, Dr. Thomas. As we move closer, I know you mentioned that we, or Director Cawthorn as well, that we will get some itemized items. When should we expect that?
March 20th.
As far as in your timeline, March 20th, you said?
March 23rd.
March
At
23rd.
that study session on the 23rd, yeah.
Okay. And then will we get another list of itemized items further down the line, or is that going to be the only time that we receive that?
That will be the time that we'll have everything that we have vetted internally that we anticipate that we would be able to do
Okay.
for the upcoming year. Because then our natural cadence of that timeline after that study session goes into the first business meeting so that we can meet contractual obligations to bring notice to any kind of ULAs, non-renewals, et cetera, that has to be taken, acted upon in April.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Cool. Appreciate it. Thank you. I understand. First year, so got it. We're working on one example here ourselves, so that's what we were used to. And so I appreciate everything that you're doing and the transparency moving forward, and we will know what to anticipate.
Anyone else? Sorry, I had more too, but go ahead.
Oh, I just, I don't like myself when I do what I just did a few minutes ago, so I apologize for interrupting. I don't like it when people do it to me, so I don't like it when I do it to other people, so I apologize. I'm about to go to a choir concert, and I don't know what that's gonna look like next year. This is obviously heartbreaking and hard for all of us, in this district. It is emotional. It is emotional. I just want to make sure that the goalpost doesn't keep moving. That's what I'm afraid of. We have our board priorities. And I know you said that, I think it was you, Dr. Thomas, who said, or maybe it was you that said, when you go into these meetings with the building leadership, that the priorities are there and you lead with it, or however you said it. So I know that everybody's aware, making these decisions. So I just want to make sure that our goalposts don't keep moving, because that's even harder and that's confusing, for administration, for the community, for our kids. And so that's, I guess, the call for me to keep in mind, for everybody else to keep in mind too. That's what I'm worried about. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Director Olsted.
I think, Director Mason, did you have something else?
Yeah, just, Another question I still had. So, the savings range for the elementary site consolidation we were quoted when we made that decision was 1.9 to 2.7 million. And now we're seeing at 1.69 million, cost savings. So substantially lower than what we originally thought we were cutting. Is there any kind of glaring reasons or things that we thought we could cut that maybe didn't pan out? Or is there any explanation for that that you can provide?
Pardon me. The amounts that you saw back in May, I believe it was, with regard to the closure of Westwood, there were a number of positions listed there that were Westwood positions, but not necessarily tied to classroom instructors, right? I would say that since then, we have parsed out those that are like custodial, and that's under the operational, and it doesn't belong under the elementary, consolidation piece. Similarly, like food and nutrition, for example, or child nutrition, that is also going to be managed on a district-wide level, because some folks aren't going to necessarily move, some folks are going to stay put where they are, and some are going to need to move, right? And that is something that needs to be decided more district-wide as to how best to service those. So I know that that's the case. As I took a look at the list and comparing what it was that was on the list and what is now on the list, it really then comes down to like, the specialists were handled as a separate process, right? Taking a look at that as a whole, and what is that going to take to make that happen? And additionally, then the other nuanced positions, if they were special ed related, I know that there's quite a bit of district-wide thought process going into that as well, as to where best do we need to either shift these people because we are, needing this additional service over here in this area for next year in our planning, and so that those aren't going to be showing up there either. So you're paring it down to really kind of more like your admin assistants, your principal, your, the true supplemental, or I should say, standard, but not necessarily needed if you have one less site, right? So I think that's why you're seeing that differences there, because I know, for example, the custodial is parsed out completely.
So those were just lumped into that prior, but really they're coming out of separate funds, so.
Exactly.
Yeah, because when we looked at it, when Director Ryder and I sat down and we went through it numerous times, we understand why they did it that way. It's just when you're repurposing a school, it's easy to take that roster of folks and just say, here's kind of their total expenditure, and that's the reduction. But when we really look at it, it's just not going to be folks that are currently at that school that are going to be affected. So it could happen at different locations, different buildings, different departments. So we just felt it would be more accurate to really look at what's coming from the true repurposing of that school and then shifting some of those other repurposings to other departments and areas.
Thank you.
I just have one more thing to add. As we're sitting here tonight and we're talking about, we have $1 million worth of A&I funding that we can use, and we're looking at how do we develop that plan. Perhaps we need to look at that plan a little bit differently. And if it's $9,000 for a ski trip, that's definitely something you could probably write into that A&I plan. If other districts are writing in their BizTown field trips into the A&I plan, it just really hurts my heart when we sat and we said, as far as our board budget priorities, that the goal was to optimize resources while allocating more resources directly to the classroom and student learning. So when we're taking away opportunities from our students to learn, my challenge is can we use that $1 million of A&I funding to fill the gap on some of that funding so that we don't have to take away resources from our students and opportunities away from our students?
So I would say, again, going back to my comment earlier about 6 on one, half a dozen on the other in terms of does ski qualify as classroom instruction and student learning? Yes, I think there's some great learning opportunities for kids to build some social skills, friendships, et cetera. Is that classroom instruction? No, that wouldn't be classroom instruction. So again, I'm not trying to mince words, but I just want, I just want to be clear, this is the dilemma that we find ourselves in, and these are the real conversations that we're having, Director Atkinson, even with our department heads and building administrators, of how people are interpreting the priorities. I mean, they're clear, but I just want to be mindful that, when we look at the priorities, classroom instruction and the learning that comes as a result of that classroom instruction is how I am interpreting that. Can we use other resources? I won't make it just about A&I funding. I will tell you that this is the creativity and the innovation that Director Ryder's team is doing within legal parameters to braid as much different funding together to make the best outcomes given the realities before us. I can assure this board and assure our community that that is what we will continue to, that's what we have to do. And so within the parameters of each categorical pot, as you all know, it comes with a lot of state and or federal strings attached to categorical funding. And within the boundaries of those guidelines, and there's ways that we could, in this situation, supplement a learning experience for students, those are the things that we're already doing and that we'll continue to do.
Thank you. Director Smith?
Really not trying to extend this conversation any further, but Chair Bullion, I just wanted to say, earlier you said that this is a situation that we have put folks in, and I agree with that statement. The board, whether it's whoever is sitting in these seats, the board has been part of these decisions, and the district is dealing with the ramifications of those previous decisions. There are no third options. And as we've said repeatedly here tonight, we're choosing between things that are good. And I apologize if I got a little heated as well, but for me, the stakes are just so high. And I really think that while the board hasn't helped in the past, I don't think we're helping now either. And I say that because it is our job to evaluate and learn about the proposals and the recommendations that the district is bringing to us and asking tough questions and trying to understand the impact. But what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing are creating expectations in our community that might not reflect what is actually achievable or advisable for Dr. Thomas and his team. We need to set realistic expectations. And this was always going to get worse before it got better. So I just want to acknowledge the work that the district is doing, but also just, again, it's just a plea of just understand that nobody enjoys this. I don't enjoy, again, lengthening this conversation at all, but I think we need to set some realistic expectations about what is actually possible and what we're looking at and what we're dealing with.
Well, I appreciate all of the input, the board member input, honestly. I think we each as elected officials, we each bring our gifts and talents to the mix, and we get to share our experience, our thoughts, and especially at a study session, this is exactly what we are to do. We're rolling up our sleeves, we're discussing things, and it can be emotional, it can be, given our current state, I agree. No one's in a space that we would choose to be in, but we are. So we're making the best decisions given the space that we're in. So I appreciate all the feedback. Is there any other things to add or questions to ask before we move on? Okay, so thank you
Yes,
all.
thank you for your
to
time,
the
and I
senior
appreciate the
leadership
feedback.
team.
Thank you.
Thank you for all that. All right, so the next item, excuse me, I'm gonna take a drink. The next item on our agenda is the superintendent evaluation summary. On February 9th, the Prior Lake Savage Area Schools Board of Education and Superintendent Dr. Michael Thomas conducted conducted a closed session for the purpose of completing the superintendent's mid-year goal review. The review included progress toward the following goals. Academic achievement and consistency was Goal 1. Strategic financial stewardship was Goal 2. And Goal 3 was political leadership and community engagement. Board feedback was provided, and Dr. Thomas was given the opportunity to respond, ask questions, and seek clarification. Additional feedback from the board was also shared with Dr. Thomas during this process. On February 16th, the superintendent and myself met to review the feedback and finalize the mid-year evaluation summary, and the summary was reviewed and signed. Next up on the agenda is board governance. And we have 3 policies that we are reviewing this evening. Policy 101, legal status of the school district, Policy 101.1, the name of the school district, and Policy 104, which is school district mission statement. And so I will turn it over to Director Cawthorn for any overview to share before we tackle these one by one.
Yes, thank you. Oops. Thank you. So I want to pull up my document. Give me just 1 second, sorry. All right, so we had our policy committee meeting, and we went over a few of the policies, and we were able to come up with some for a first reading. And of course, my computer, I pretty much have them memorized, so I'll just go off the cuff until my computer wants to turn on for me. It was Policy 101. And a lot of the policies you're going to see in front of you tonight, they just had either some clerical changes or it was kind of the recommendation of the policy committee, there we go, that we started to try to align our policies more structurally, kind of looking like MSBA's policies, so that way when the policies are being reviewed by the committee or by the board, they're a little bit easier to read to compare them to MSBA structurally. So that's where some of the changes that you're going to see in these policies are coming from. So once again, starting with the 101, the legal status of the school district. Once again, we added some language in 2C to match MSBA as well as in 4F. And we did add some legal references and cross-references to match that of MSBA to mirror our policies. And then we made some clerical changes to the numbering. So that's what you're seeing in Policy 101.
Oh, sorry.
Do we go all one time or do you go individually?
I think if we could pause, if there's any board member questions or discussion on this first policy, we'll talk about it here. No? Okay, next,
Okay,
thank you.
Great, yeah. 101, it's the name of the school district, and there was some comments in our policy committee meeting that there was a few that would like to change the name, and I'm guessing most people could probably guess what that name would be, but we told them that we do not have the jurisdiction to really change the name of the school district. So here in the policy 101.1, we deleted an old 3, number 3 there, and the title, and it's just that match, once again, the MSB language to just have a general statement of the policy. And then we added a new 3 for the uniform name to match MSBA. Once again, added the legal references and cross-references and made some clerical changes to the numbering.
Board members, anything? Okay, next, thank you.
Awesome, yes. And then the final one is number 104. It's a school district mission statement. So we had to make some adjustments here to actually make sure that the correct district mission statement was in there. So we did add that. And then Article 4, we just matched that to the MSB language and then added legal references and cross-references in there as well, too. And we did add a line in there about the referencing the strategic plan.
Board members? Director France.
You're all excited. In 104, with the district mission statement, Article 4 doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I understand that the MSB is template language, but to start off saying we're going to review the mission every 2 years, which is an integral part of the vision and overall strategic plan, but then we're going to conduct a comprehensive review every 5 to 7 years. Why the first sentence? It just seems like that was a template language, and we can review the mission every few years, but we can't really review it because we can't make any changes to it without looking at the overall comprehensive review and plan. So why the first sentence?
I think I can answer that for you, being on the policy committee. the school board has the authority to do that, to review the mission and ensure that, that what we're doing aligns to the mission. And then MSBA does say that we are to review the entire strategic plan every 3 to 5 years. So it's just coming out of MSBA's guidance on how school boards conduct their business. That's where it's coming from.
No, I get that, and again, MSBA uses template language, and then you can make it your own. So some of it doesn't always make sense. Sometimes they include more than one thing, but we're always going to be reviewing the mission every single time that we meet to make sure we're in alignment with it. The school board, it says the mission, the vision, and the plan are all related. And we've had a statement made, not necessarily in policy, that we're going to try to review it every 5 years. Obviously, I don't mind the change of 5 to 7 years because that allows us a little bit more flexibility, particularly if the environment is different or changed. But what is the definition of reviewing it if we're not going to change it? Aren't we always going to be doing this every year that we make a, any of our decisions? We're going to look at this to make sure that our decisions align with the vision, the mission, and the plan?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I think that from the structural standpoint, once again, as you can see, it was new. So at one point in time, this was not in this policy.
Right.
And so as we went through, and from the committee standpoint, once again, it was just more to mirror those of MSBA. Not, and once again, like you said, we don't have to necessarily, it's guidelines, for us to follow, and don't necessarily have to put it in there. But from this standpoint, I think the committee's response was, if this is something that MSBA is putting in theirs, then what's the hurt in having it in our policy? And I understand what you're saying as far as we're reviewing it all the time. It's a constant review. So then why does it necessarily need to be in policy? And once again, it's the first read. I mean, if there's something that, the board would like us to, look at differently, we can definitely do that. But this was the committee's recommendation to add that in there.
Well, I would suggest that we make a change to say the school board is responsible for continuously ensuring that their actions correspond or align with the mission, and that then the school board will conduct a comprehensive review of the mission, including the beliefs and values of the community, every 5 to 7 years, which is fine with me. I don't like the language per se there, but there's nothing really wrong with it. It's just that to say that we're going to review it every 5 to 7 years, and then the first sentence saying we're going to review it every 2 years. Technically review it all the time. I mean, we're not even reviewing it, we're just assuring we align with it. So, language just doesn't make sense to me.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
Director France, I would argue differently. The whole point of this policy is about if you read 104, the title is School District Mission Statement. So this is about the mission statement.
But can
And
I get
it's
some
saying-
more input into this from anybody,
Yeah, can I
please?
finish, please, Director France? Thank you. So the whole point of this policy is it is about the mission statement, and school boards they have the authority, as board members change, to be able to update and change the mission every 2 years. Now, and then it also adds that your strategic plan should be looked at every 5 to 7 years. So it's very explicit on, this is the policy about the mission, and it talks about that, when it should be reviewed, and then it talks about the strategic plan, the timing of the strategic plan. So
Well,
there's
actually,
a point,
the second sentence doesn't say
behind
strategic plan. The second sentence again says mission.
a comprehensive review of the mission. So maybe that should say the mission. So maybe that should say a comprehensive review of the strategic plan. I would be okay with that, the comprehensive review of the strategic plan every 5 to 7 years, because that's reality. I mean, that's what we do.
I'm asking for everybody's opinion.
And I am as well, so thank you. Can other people chime in, please?
Everybody's
Thank you.
If I may, can I ask, what's the cadence of how often these policies are reviewed, the 100 series?
Every 3 years.
Every 3 years? I mean, so is it a possibility that we would just say, because, I mean, what we're reviewing here is the school district mission statement. Is it possible that that's what we're referring to here? The school board will review the school district's mission statement every 3 years? Because that's essentially kind of what we're doing here, isn't it? And then the comprehensive review of the strategic plan, mission, whatever we want to call it there, is every 5 to 7 years.
So you're saying in the first sentence, replace 2 with 3?
I mean, if that's our cadence, it seems,
It's the cadence for the policy,
sure,
not
but
the
it's,
mission.
maybe
the
not
school
necessarily
district
the
mission statement is the policy that we're discussing.
Yeah.
So,
Director France, you had a suggestion for the first sentence.
Yes.
And I don't know if we should, like, all write it down. Director Cawthorn, I don't know if you want to take Director France offline and see her suggestion. I think with the policy committee, that was the first, this last committee meeting was the first run on these policies.
Correct.
And so they'll be discussed one more time, is that correct? That's not the
No,
cadence?
these go to the board to vote.
Just the board, okay. So you offered a suggestion, and I think that we need to give direction.
I actually like Director Smith's suggestion of 3 years, since that's how, when we review this policy, we're updating the mission statement in the policy, and then maybe just changing the language of the second sentence to say strategic plan instead of mission. That does make sense to
Yeah,
me.
I would support that as well.
So my question would be, if we change that second sentence to say strategic plan, this policy is regarding the mission. So would that be in conflict at all? Do you see?
No, I mean, you're still referencing, I mean, the mission statement's part of it.
I'm struggling to see how we're going to separate the mission from the vision statement from the overall strategic plan. I mean, you change, there's a relationship there.
I think when we updated the strategic plan, clearly we didn't update this particular policy, right, until now when it
Correct.
came up.
Right,
So that's what it's
correct.
kind of stating.
No, but the policy is one thing, because the policy just states our cadence for review. It doesn't actually state the mission statement.
It's
What
in
I'm
section
asking
2.
is if we start changing the mission statement in a different cadence than reviewing the overall strategic plan, how do you ensure that everything remains cohesive and makes sense? I mean, normally when you review a mission statement, you also look at the vision and your overall strategy. You start separating one out, and you do run into some level of relationship there.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I don't think you would ever change a mission without having this re-review, but it is stated in section 3, the district mission, that's on here. So that's why I kind of agree
And
with
it's
that.
board authority. So I think it's just,
Could be.
I honestly agree, I don't think it ever would change. But the whole point of this policy is about the mission statement, and the board has the authority to review that.
But we're always
and-
reviewing it, right?
Right. No, it's not saying change it. It says to review. So I think the language is reflective of the policy, of what the intent of the policy is. It doesn't change, the school board will change. It just says that we'll review it, so.
But we're always reviewing it. We're always looking at the strategic plan that
Then
contains
we're-
the mission and the vision. So why, and we're not changing it, we're just making sure we align with it.
Well, let's just
That's
make
what-
sure that
that's
we're.
my concern.
Well, let's make sure that we're sticking with this policy and this work of, so
I concur with, I like Director Smith's.
if we
Right.
changed it to every 3 years, that at least matches the cadence of our review, our policy review.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm okay with that.
And then change
Second sentence.
mission to strategic plan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
It still doesn't make any sense to me, but it's contradictory, but okay. I'm good. I don't care. Just that I would just put on record that the first statement then doesn't really make logical sense.
Are you still under review, or are you now back?
No,
up
I'm
to-
under review. I'm under review. Everything else on there is fine. It's just,
So are you proposing that the first sentence be stricken in its entirety? You had stated that, and then you also stated a suggestion for a rewrite, that it was long, I didn't write it down.
no, the suggestion was that the board is responsible for continually ensuring that we're in line, aligned with our mission statement, and then the strategic plan. The mission statement as part of the strategic plan is reviewed every 5 to 7 years, as it states. The second sentence is fine. It just, like I said, if you're going to take this to court, you got some contradictions going on, and that's why.
I understand the seemingly contradictory with the 2 years and then the 5 to 7 years. I understand what.
No. The contradiction is having the assumption that the board is going to change or could change the mission statement outside of the cadence of the strategic plan.
Where does that assumption list?
Well, if you're reviewing the mission statement every 2 or 3 years, and the board can change the mission statement is what was implied, then, because it's, we don't have to go to the community and for the strategic plan, either we choose to. And then we're going to review the strategic plan as we agreed with every 5 years. I mean, we could run into a situation where a board wants to come in and just replace the mission, and that could contradict with the overall strategic plan, which is vision, mission, and plan. So that's why I'm separating these things out and then making them on 2 different areas. And then the goal of the school district mission statement really is that we follow it.
Offer a perspective. I actually follow the logic in several statements you all are making. I think a fundamental hiccup is using review in perhaps different ways. So as I read the first review, I think all of what you all were saying, that especially as new board members come on, center yourself on that mission statement. Review it, understand it, know how things align. Like, that's how I interpret review. Because, I mean, think about any other industry or business out there, they're not changing their mission statement every 2 years. A mission statement should have staying power. It's your brand, it's your why. And if you're, changing your why every 2 years, so I don't believe they're expecting, I wasn't there at this particular policy meeting. I don't think the intent was to review to revise the mission statement every 2 years.
Correct.
And to Director Smith's point, 3 years. So that's how I read it. The second one, I think we're missing a word. I think we need to be clear that every 5 to 7 years that the board would conduct a comprehensive review of the mission, including the beliefs, values, community, every 5 to 7 years, for lack of a better term, with the possibility to revise. Like, I think you're doing that extensive review, like we did my third year here, because we were coming to the end of the timeline of our, you're going to possibly revise the whole strategic plan to include the mission statement. And above in the general statement of policy, it clearly states, the school board, on behalf of and with extensive participation by the community, will develop consensus, around the nature of the enterprise. That's the whole strat plan. So I think we're missing a word about, we're reviewing to be familiar with the mission in the first sentence, and we're doing a comprehensive review with the possibility of revising whole-scale strat plan in the second sentence. So somewhere in there, I'm missing maybe a word in that second sentence.
Well, I like what you said, because that was my confusion too, is why are we reviewing it? And just to review it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're supposed to be living it and
Living it,
making sure
yeah.
we're in alignment with it when we do the review. So there wasn't a definition there. And then they added description of we're the board and we can change it. You wouldn't want to change the mission statement alone and leave everything else
Right. You're
intact.
not doing
So,
that every couple of
so
years.
this needs to be just a little, whether you use my language or anything, any other language, we need to make sure that this can't be dissected in ways that it wasn't intended to be, I believe, is if I'm kind of reading into what the MSBA language could have been.
Can we go on the second sentence, comprehensive review or revise?
Yeah, something along those lines, I think just needs to be added in there about that. You're doing that review.
Review.
With the potential to revise.
Of the
which makes sense.
strategic plan,
Of
though.
the strat-
That it's
Of
the-
which the mission is a
second-
part of that.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
of the
Yep.
strategic plan.
That's how, I mean, that makes sense. Organizationally, that's what most
Comprehensive
organizations
review
do.
or
Right.
revision of the strategic plan.
I think of the strategic plan,
Yeah.
just change the word mission to
Yes,
strategic plan.
yes, yep.
And add in revise, so you make that distinction. I like
Yes.
that. But
Or
why would we only
comprehensive
review
review
the
or
mission
revision.
every 3 years too?
Or revision.
Or revision of the strategic plan.
Comprehensive review, yep.
And then in leaving, including the beliefs and values of the community?
Yes.
Every 5
Yeah.
to 7 years?
Yes, it has to be that.
Every 5
And
to 7
ending-
years.
Ending there.
We already have that up at the top too, so either make it consistent or just leave it to the top statement.
I think it needs to be there, to be honest with you, because it's really, it just reiterates
Yeah.
the importance of including the
And
community.
then, and
Can
then
it-
2 to 3 years for the first sentence?
Well, can I ask a just general statement? Are we really going to review it only 2 or 3 years? I mean, I'm looking at the common sense of this. I mean, don't we always look at our strategic plan?
That's not the
mean,
I mean,
it's-
we look at
It's
policy
living,
every 3
breathing.
years.
We
Right.
look at it constantly. And, you know, the first sentence under section 4, the school board will review the school district's mission with Director Smith's recommendation, we could do 3 to be in line with our review how we review cycle. Especially when members of the board change. It's talking about as, you know, and that's every 2, well, and, you know, if we have a special election, it can be different, but I think it's, that language is just highlighting, policy for new board members, and.
My guess is, as MSBA was looking at this, they know the cadence of potential board changes. And there will be kind of a predictive, almost every 2 years, there will be a member that changes. So I think again, I'm not MSBA, I'm
Yeah.
only assuming, I'm guessing that's how 2 years came up.
Probably
Right.
because they were thinking about elections.
And,
but yeah.
and it's all centered around elections to ensure, outside of your daily, looking at it here and where else, when you have an election, you have an intentionality. Let's look as a board, we have a new member, 2 members, whatever, let's review it. You know, so it's set in stone outside of the daily cadence. I'm guessing that's where that timeline comes from.
I'm pretty sure it does. It just,
And then tying
Yeah.
it back to the board member change, so.
So I'll read this one more time and please correct anything that's wrong. The school board will review the school district's mission every 3 years, especially when members of the board change. The school board will conduct a comprehensive review or revision of the strategic plan, including the beliefs and values of the community every 5 to 7 years.
Can I
Yeah,
offer
please.
something
Yeah,
on what you
please.
just said?
Yeah, please.
If you're gonna say every 3 years, I would
Oh.
suggest to say or when members of the board change, not especially.
Oh, I'd say, yeah.
I would
like
say
that.
or, so
Yeah,
it's
that's
3
good.
or.
Or.
And then, I would not remove the mission in the second sentence, because that's part of the strat plan.
Okay.
So you would say the school board will conduct a comprehensive review of the strategic plan, including the mission, vision, core beliefs, that, you know, whatever the components are of, you know, what we have, priorities,
do
whatever.
you want to say review or revise?
Yes,
Yeah,
the
okay.
review / revise or whatever, it definitely stays, but I wouldn't omit, I think you omitted mission.
I think that I did.
Well, you could
as
put
well.
strategic plan, though.
yeah,
That's the whole
Or
point.
just make
The
it strategic plan for whatever it is.
I would say
Yeah.
strategic plan, I think that encompasses
The vision and
the
mission.
whole.
Yes,
But I wouldn't say including the beliefs and values, because,
no,
Take those out.
no,
Well,
you need that,
I
though.
think that, I would leave that because I feel like that is part of values of the community.
Yes,
That-
correct.
That's not, I don't think that's
I got you.
talking about our strategic plan.
And it is already mentioned in the general statement
Got
of
it.
policy.
Yeah, makes sense. I follow you guys' what you're saying now.
Okay.
If the goal of the MSBA was to make sure that new boards then, every 2 years, review it, I mean, just because our policy is renewed every 3 years doesn't mean that we shouldn't have in policy that we review the mission every 2 years. Just review it, but not revise it, and make the revise only in the second statement. That's correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Director Cawthorn, do you have that?
Yep, so I have it to read. It's updated now. The school board will review the school district's mission every 3 years or when members of the board change. Second sentence will read, the school board will conduct a comprehensive review or revision of the strategic plan, including the beliefs and values of the community every 5 to 7 years.
I think that's perfect.
Good. I think that captures it wonderfully.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else on this one? All right. Well, that was all for policies, and now, before we move into closed session, I need to state for the record that pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03, this meeting is being closed to discuss negotiation strategy. Do I have a motion and a second to adjourn the study session and transition to a closed meeting?
So made.
By Director Johnson, second?
Second.
By Director Atkinson. All in favor?
Okay.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. And I will say we'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll resume closed session. Thanks, everybody.